Brook Hollow Greens was a peaceful suburban haven boasting manicured lawns, winding sidewalks, and rows of tidy two-story houses. A broad sign at the entrance declared its name in flowing script, flanked by blooming azaleas every spring. Visitors often remarked on the calm, picture-perfect vibe, proof, they said, that the Brook Hollow Greens Homeowners Association, HOA, ran a tight ship. Many residents enjoyed the HOA's well-maintained pool, the small clubhouse for events, and the sense of order that came from shared rules. Streets stayed clear of clutter. Houses adhered to a neutral color palette. While some chafed at the restrictions, most recognized the board's good intentions, preserving property values, encouraging neighborly pride. Yet among this dedicated group of volunteers, one presence overshadowed them all. Veronica Arlette, an outspoken middle-aged woman with a regal bearing and a habit of peering into everyone's business. Though her real name seldom appeared on official documents, neighbors referred to her simply as Karen. The label stuck because of her insistent demands, her unwavering belief in her own correctness, and her readiness to micromanage the community. Karen's unsolicited inspections were legendary. She'd notice if a trash bin lingered at the curb 10 minutes too long, or if a front yard displayed a single weed. She was known to confront dog walkers about leashes and scold teenagers for riding skateboards near the clubhouse. Some residents appreciated her vigilance, but many found her approach too aggressive, especially since she wasn't even the HOA president. Karen seemed fueled by a belief that she alone knew what was best for Brook Hollow Greens. Time and again, small controversies flared up around her, only to fade. But soon, a new drama would erupt. A clash over a modest community garden that, in Karen's eyes, was an affront to the neighborhood's carefully pruned image. Little did she suspect that her disdain for ugly vegetables would spark the greatest outpouring of unity Brook Hollow Greens had ever witnessed. The idea for a community garden sprouted among a few eco-minded residents. They wanted to transform a small vacant lot, once a dumping ground for mulch, into a shared space where neighbors could grow fresh produce. With the HOA's cautious blessing, the group cleared weeds, tilled soil, and installed simple wooden beds. Soon, families began planting tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and even wildflowers to attract pollinators. Among the most enthusiastic gardeners were seniors who craved a chance to stay active and social. Some brought grandchildren to learn about planting seeds. Others exchanged tips on composting and organic pest control. The garden became a quiet beacon of collaboration in Brook Hollow Greens, until Karen paid it a visit. Wandering by one afternoon, she froze at the sight of rambling green vines and crooked rows of seedlings. It offended her sense of neatness. Sure, the HOA had approved a garden concept, but she imagined something more ornamental, perhaps trimmed hedges with potted herbs, not chaotic mounds of dirt. Over the next weeks, she gossiped about how unattractive and unprofessional the garden looked. She told the garden committee that their disorganized patch was diminishing Brook Hollow's carefully cultivated curb appeal. Members politely explained that real gardens rarely look symmetrical. Vegetables need space to sprawl. Unplanned color combos are part of nature's charm. But Karen wasn't satisfied. She demanded immediate reorganization or risk an HOA violation. The volunteer gardeners, uncertain if Karen's threats carried official weight, felt torn. Comply with her cosmetic demands or risk conflict. They opted to keep planting, hoping the bountiful harvest might change her mind. Yet Karen's patience was already worn thin. Over the next few weeks, the garden committee added simple wooden stakes with handwritten labels: cherry tomatoes, zucchini, basil, peppers. They installed a sign reading Brook Hollow Greens Community Garden. All are welcome. The modest patch attracted curious neighbors who offered leftover seedlings or came to chat about recipes. A sense of pride grew with each new sprout. Karen, however, grew more vocal in her displeasure. She repeatedly cornered the committee's informal leader, Linda Flores, at the mailbox, insisting they cut back excess growth or align the rows. Linda explained again that real vegetables can't always fit perfect geometric lines. Karen scowled, calling it an eyesore. Some nights, passers-by saw her standing at the garden's edge, arms folded, as if daring the plants to step out of line. At a monthly HOA meeting, Karen demanded an immediate motion to impose stricter visual standards for the garden. The board hesitated, reluctant to hamper a volunteer project that many residents enjoyed. Ms. Caldwell, the HOA president, suggested a compromise. Maybe the garden could add neat borders or small pathways. Linda agreed to consider small improvements, but not at the cost of stifling the plant's natural growth. Karen, unsatisfied, left the meeting early. Whispers flew around the neighborhood about Karen's next move. Some shrugged it off. She'd always fussed over minor details. Others worried she might escalate. If the HOA wouldn't forcibly tidy the garden, might she take matters into her own hands? Meanwhile, in the warm spring sun, the vegetables continued to flourish, oblivious to the brewing tension. Their leaves stretched wide, blossoms appeared, and small green fruit began to form. Linda and the committee felt a flicker of hope that their harvest would soon demonstrate the garden's worth to even the staunchest critic. They had no idea how far Karen would go to crush that ideal. One humid evening, as dusk settled over Brook Hollow greens, Linda stopped by the garden to water a few thirsty rows of cucumbers. She admired the gentle glow of fireflies dancing among the leaves. Humming to herself, she sprayed each bed lightly, mindful not to oversoak. Then, from the corner of her eye, she noticed a figure striding purposefully across the lawn. It was Karen, in a neat blouse and slacks, face set in a grim line. Linda paused, trying a friendly wave. Karen ignored it, stepping onto the garden's perimeter with a sneer. Before Linda could ask what was wrong, Karen hissed, "I've had enough of this mess. It's time we put an end to it." In a shocking move, Karen lifted her foot and stomped down on the nearest row of young lettuce. Leaves tore under her heel. Linda gasped, dropping the hose. "Karen, what are you doing?" Karen didn't answer. She advanced, trampling pepper plants next, snapping fragile stems. The wide leaves collapsed underfoot. Linda rushed forward, shouting for her to stop, but Karen shoved her aside. "You refuse to keep it tidy. This is the result." Panic surged in Linda's chest. She tried to grab Karen's arm, but Karen yanked free, stomping row after row. A few moments felt like an eternity. The luscious green patch turned into a flattened ruin. Linda scrambled to shield the tomato bed, but Karen pivoted and stomped again, crushing half the seedlings. At last, Linda managed to snatch Karen's wrist, wrestling her away from further damage. Breathing hard, Karen shot Linda a venomous glare. "If you'd listened to me about proper standards, we wouldn't have gotten here." Then she stormed off, leaving Linda trembling with shock and anger. Water pooled around the battered remains of the once thriving plants. A hush fell, broken only by Linda's ragged breaths. Karen's rampage had escalated from words to violence in mere minutes, and the entire community garden project now lay in tatters. At first light, Linda returned with a few committee members, dreading what they'd find. Sure enough, entire rows of lettuce, peppers, and tomatoes lay smashed, stems snapped, roots exposed. Footprints marred the soft soil. Anguish rippled among the volunteers, some exclaiming in disbelief. They recognized Karen's shoe prints leading from one bed to the next. She hadn't merely pruned or yanked a few plants. She'd systematically trampled everything in her path. Word spread swiftly across Brook Hollow greens. Neighbors stopped by to see the damage, shaking their heads at the cruelty. Some asked if Linda had confronted Karen or if the police should be called. Linda, still shaken, recounted the horrifying encounter in hushed tones. Many demanded legal action, citing vandalism. Others suggested contacting the HOA board to demand Karen face repercussions, possibly fines or removal from any official involvement. Meanwhile, Karen stayed out of sight, offering no apologies. Rumor had it she believed she'd done the neighborhood a favor, teaching the garden committee a lesson about ignoring her advice. The entire block buzzed with condemnation. Even residents who once sided with Karen on minor aesthetic disputes found her actions unforgivable. This was no petty complaint. This was outright sabotage. That morning, the garden committee decided on an emergency meeting to discuss next steps. Should they replant or give up entirely? The sabotage felt like a punch to the gut, weeks of careful labor undone. But Linda refused to yield. While tears glistened in her eyes, she insisted they must regroup, replant, and ensure Karen never had the chance to destroy the garden again. The question was, how to protect the site from further attacks while still fostering the sense of open community they cherished. By midday, a small gathering formed at the flattened garden. Linda, a few seniors, and some outraged parents shared their thoughts. They snapped photos of the damage, intending to file a formal complaint with the HOA. A father named Michael insisted they contact local law enforcement. This was trespassing and vandalism. Others worried that without direct video evidence, proving Karen's guilt might be tough, though Linda had witnessed it firsthand. They decided to approach the HOA first, given that Karen's misdeed clearly violated community rules about destroying common property. The group marched to the clubhouse, seeking Ms. Caldwell, the HOA president. Ms. Caldwell, upon seeing the photos, was visibly appalled. She admitted Karen had always been aggressive about aesthetics, but never suspected she'd stoop to physically damaging property. She promised to hold a special board session that very evening. Simultaneously, neighbors hopped online to share the story. The Brook Hollow Greens forum lit up with posts titled "Garden Massacre" and "Has Karen Gone Too Far?" Residents expressed fury at the sabotage. Some threatened a recall petition against Karen if she held any formal position, though she was never officially on the board. Others suggested stationing volunteers to guard the garden at night or installing cameras. A wave of solidarity emerged. People who'd never gardened offered to help replant. Seniors reliant on the fresh produce or the gentle pastime felt especially hurt. They had grown to love tending the delicate seedlings, and now they felt betrayed by a neighbor's blatant disregard. That day, sorrow mingled with resolve. The community refused to let the garden die. One question loomed: how to ensure its safety from Karen's next outburst. That evening, the HOA board convened in a crowded meeting room at the clubhouse. Over 50 residents squeezed in, many forced to stand along the walls. The tension was palpable. Never had the monthly session drawn such a crowd. On one side, Linda and the garden committee sat together, brandishing photos of the crushed plants. On the other, Karen arrived in crisp attire, flanked by a couple of acquaintances. She sat stiffly, avoiding eye contact. Ms. Caldwell opened the floor to Linda, who recounted the stomping incident in detail. Gasps arose when she described how Karen had shoved her aside to continue the destruction. Linda showed the pictures, the footprints, and read a half-dozen written testimonies from neighbors who'd arrived immediately after. A hush fell when Linda's voice wavered, recalling the heartbreak of seeing so many seedlings ruined. Karen, given a chance to respond, feigned indignation. "I only stepped on a few plants because the path was obstructed. They're exaggerating. That garden was a hazard, overgrown, easy to trip in." Her statement drew angry murmurs. Some wanted to shout her down. Ms. Caldwell banged the gavel for order. Board member Mr. Braxton demanded, "Karen, the evidence suggests an intentional act of vandalism. This garden is communal property. Such aggression is unacceptable." Karen bristled, replying that the committee refused to maintain basic standards, and she'd merely done some necessary clearing. The board conferred privately. Though they lacked a formal police report, the overwhelming evidence pointed to Karen's guilt. Ms. Caldwell emerged to declare the HOA's stance. "We condemn any sabotage of the community garden. We will sponsor repairs and expansions to safeguard it. As for Ms. Arlette, we will impose a fine and restrictions from HOA committees. Further measures may follow if damage recurs." Thunderous applause filled the room, drowning Karen's scowl. The meeting adjourned with a sense of moral victory, though the real rebuilding had yet to begin. Buoyed by the HOA's support, the garden committee gathered at Linda's house to strategize. With so many destroyed plants, they needed replanting. But how could they ensure Karen, or anyone else, wouldn't sabotage it again? Someone suggested installing a fence around the perimeter. Another proposed raised beds with sturdier frames. A third advocated a key-coded gate. But that felt too exclusive. This was a community space, after all. One volunteer, Martin, an older resident who used a walker, chimed in. "If we raise beds higher, it'll also help seniors who can't bend down easily. And a gentle ramp or walkway could make it accessible for folks with wheelchairs. Why not seize this chance to design something truly inclusive?" The idea resonated. If they had to rebuild, why not do so in a way that improved the garden for everyone while deterring vandalism? They drafted a plan. Raised beds, at least waist-high, robustly constructed from timber or composite, ensuring plants aren't as vulnerable to casual stomping. A perimeter fence, not a fortress, but a decorative, low fence with a lockable gate. This would discourage unauthorized entry at night, but remain open during daylight. Ramp access. A gently sloped walkway so seniors and those with mobility challenges could navigate between beds easily. Design aesthetics. Painted or stained wood, maybe a small arbor with flowering vines, ensuring the structure was as beautiful as any ornamental feature in Brook Hollow Greens. Everyone loved it. The improved design would reflect the community's resilience in the face of Karen's aggression. They decided to request funds from the HOA's beautification budget, pointing out how the garden aligned with the neighborhood's values. If the board approved, they could crowdsource labor from volunteers. Plenty had already offered help after the sabotage. This new blueprint transformed heartbreak into a chance for renewal. At the next board session, held barely a week after the sabotage fiasco, Linda and her team presented their plan. They showed sketches of raised wooden planters, a decorative fence, and a gently sloped ramp leading to a central walkway. They argued that this upgrade wouldn't just protect the garden from further vandalism, it would also enhance Brook Hollow Green's image. Seniors and kids alike would benefit, forging deeper ties in the community. Ms. Caldwell and most board members looked intrigued. They recognized the goodwill potential, turning a negative incident into a shining example of neighborly collaboration. However, some worried about the cost. Linda estimated materials could total a few $1,000s if they used quality lumber, plus some metal hardware for the fence. She proposed that the HOA cover half through the beautification budget, with the rest raised via donations. The board debated pros and cons. Karen, though not officially on the board, attended and tried to sabotage the request. She insisted the garden had already proven unsightly, so investing more money was a risk. But Mr. Braxton retorted that the new design would ensure tidiness and keep appearances cohesive with the neighborhood. Another member, Ms. Young, pointed out how many residents had personally rallied behind the garden after Karen's rampage. Denying funds might spark backlash. Ultimately, the board voted in favor. They allocated a portion of the beautification budget to support the garden's rebuild. They also gave Linda's committee official approval to proceed with fence installation and structural changes, provided final color and style matched the broader aesthetic rules. Karen, forced to watch the motion pass, seethed quietly in her seat. The garden, once battered by her fury, was on track to become more secure, more accessible, and more beloved than ever. A sunny Saturday dawned, and more than 30 volunteers converged on the garden site, tools in hand, determination shining in their eyes. A small sign read "Rebuild and Renew Day" near the entrance. Linda, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, oversaw the logistics. Martin, with his walker, offered moral support and directed how high to build each raised bed so seniors could work comfortably. Others measured fence lines, while a handful mixed concrete for the corner posts. Hammering, sawing, and cheerful banter filled the air. Some volunteers cleared the destroyed plants, composting what they could. Others laid planks for raised beds, aligning them carefully in neat rows. A father and son duo installed the ramp frame, ensuring the slope complied with standard guidelines. Bits of sawdust fluttered in the breeze, mingling with the scent of fresh soil. Passers-by paused to watch, many stepping forward to lend a hand or bring refreshments. Iced tea, sandwiches, fresh fruit. Even a few neighbors who'd never gardened realized the significance of rebuilding after Karen's malicious act. The day felt like a festival of resilience, overshadowing the memory of flattened seedlings. Karen was spotted once, glaring from across the street. She took a step onto the grass, then retreated upon seeing the large crowd. Her scowl deepened when people refused to greet her, too busy in their communal project. Realizing she was unwelcome, she left. Some whispered that perhaps she'd sabotage them again. But with so many watchers, it seemed unlikely she'd risk a second rampage. As dusk approached, the transformation was evident. Sturdy wooden beds stood waist-high, forming tidy rectangular zones. The posts of a low but firm fence circled the perimeter. Tomorrow, they'd finish the gate and ramp. The volunteers parted with tired smiles, pride glowing in each face. Karen's destruction had galvanized them to build something stronger, more inclusive, and ironically more beautiful. Little did they know the best was yet to come. Bright and early Sunday, the volunteers returned to finalize the fence and ramp. Linda and Martin double-checked measurements so the ramp wouldn't be too steep for wheelchairs or walkers. Meanwhile, a group of teens hammered slats onto the fence rails. The design was charming. 4 feet high, spaced pickets that allowed passers-by to see inside but prevented casual stomping. Another small team attached a wide gate at the main entrance. They installed a simple latch, enough to deter random vandalism, but not so secure that the garden felt closed off. The ramp, built from weather-treated wood, led from the sidewalk through the gate, then gently descended into the central path between raised beds. For aesthetics, they added hanging flower baskets along the fence line, brightening the perimeter. By midday, everything was in place. The group unveiled the new layout to a few curious onlookers who applauded. The raised beds, still mostly empty aside from a few salvaged seedlings, awaited replanting. A sense of triumphant calm spread among the volunteers. The garden was no longer a messy patch, but an organized, welcoming space, a safe haven for produce and community gatherings. Linda, beaming, thanked everyone. "We turned heartbreak into hope. I can't wait to see new sprouts flourish here." Martin rolled his walker onto the ramp, testing it with a grin. "Smooth as butter," he declared. Several seniors followed, enjoying their newfound ease in navigating the garden. Children raced around excitedly, imagining all the vegetables soon to grow. That evening, Linda posted photos of the completed enclosure on the neighborhood forum. Praise poured in. "Beautiful job. So inclusive. A real gem for Brook Hollow Greens." People thanked the board for approving funds. They also recognized the volunteers for countless hours of labor. Only one user posted a negative note. Karen, complaining about the fence's color. But the wave of positivity drowned her out. Her sabotage had spurred a creation more robust, more visually pleasing, and more harmonious than the garden had ever been. The following Saturday was declared Replanting Day. Families arrived clutching seed packets, starter seedlings, and fresh compost. The raised beds offered ample space for each variety: tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, leafy greens, and a few herbs. Volunteers taught children how to tuck seedlings into the soil gently. Seniors, including Martin, found it much easier to lean over a raised bed than to stoop or kneel at ground level. The ramp proved especially helpful. Those using wheelchairs or walkers navigated from bed to bed, watering or positioning seeds without strain. The fence kept the inside peaceful, free from random foot traffic. Onlookers admired how neatly each bed was labeled with small, hand-painted signs. The once rough patch was now a tapestry of carefully placed vegetation, promising a future harvest. Some people brought small garden decorations, like a mini scarecrow and wind chimes. They tucked them among the beds, bringing whimsy to the space. A toddler squealed with delight at ladybugs crawling on a leaf. Laughter and the earthy aroma of turned soil filled the air. Linda nearly cried at how this rebirth overshadowed Karen's destructive rampage. Karen's presence was absent. Some guessed she was too embarrassed or resentful to witness the garden's new glory. The memory of her stamping feet still lingered, but the negative energy had all but dissipated under the hush of fresh seedlings. The garden felt more alive and welcoming than ever. By late afternoon, each bed was filled with newly planted shoots or seeds. A gentle sprinkling from a long hose concluded the day. As the sun dipped, a faint rainbow shimmered in the mist. On cue, a spontaneous round of applause rose from the volunteers. A sense of rebirth suffused the community garden, no longer an ugly plot in Karen's eyes, but a carefully fenced haven that fused neat design with natural growth. A week later, the HOA board issued a formal statement celebrating the garden's transformation. They posted it on the community website under the headline, "Brook Hollow Greens celebrates new accessible community garden." The announcement highlighted the fence, ramp, and raised beds, calling them shining examples of neighborly collaboration. "We commend all volunteers who rebuilt the garden, turning adversity into an even more inclusive design," it read. Ms. Caldwell read the statement at the next monthly meeting, applauding Linda's leadership. She singled out Martin as well, praising how the design now allowed seniors to participate fully. The board reiterated that vandalism of any community property would face severe penalties, an indirect message to Karen. The success story attracted a local reporter from a small suburban newspaper. She interviewed Linda, who recounted how the project overcame a destructive incident. The reporter took photos of the seniors happily tending the new beds, gleaning a story of resilience and unity. While Linda avoided naming Karen in the interview, the subtext was clear. The garden had survived an attack and emerged stronger. Karen, hearing of the recognition, felt further marginalized. Her initial complaint about messy vegetables had evolved into a glowing highlight of Brook Hollow Green's communal spirit. Public sentiment pinned her as the villain, although no official penalty beyond an HOA fine had occurred. She faced frequent cold shoulders from neighbors who recognized her hostility. Even her past allies grew quiet, wary of defending such extreme actions. Nonetheless, Karen refused to concede. She occasionally grumbled about the fence's unnecessary height or the ramp's effect on neighborhood uniformity. But no one cared to engage. The garden's official stamp of approval from the board sealed its position. Her sabotage had ironically fueled improvements that made it more visually appealing and unstoppable. Weeks passed, and tiny green sprouts in the raised beds quickly matured under warm sun and steady watering. Soon, tomatoes blossomed into small yellow flowers, peppers formed glossy buds, and leafy greens flourished. One early morning, Linda discovered the first ripe cherry tomatoes, picking a small handful. She beamed, recalling the heartbreak of the flattened patch and how far they'd come. That weekend, the garden committee invited neighbors to a mini harvest tasting. Volunteers set up a table near the ramp, displaying fresh-picked herbs, a handful of cucumbers, and baby lettuce leaves. Though it was only an initial yield, the quality felt miraculous considering the sabotage just weeks earlier. Children sampled raw veggies with ranch dip. Seniors admired the robust plant growth, remarking how the raised beds were easier on their backs. The fence and gate provided a sense of safety. Only authorized individuals or accompanied visitors stepped inside, minimizing the risk of random damage. Karen stayed away, but a few curious bystanders whispered that she might be lurking around. Linda refused to dwell on negativity. She offered tours, explaining how each bed was structured. Martin demonstrated how wheelchair users could roll right up to the bed's edge to prune or harvest. His eyes shone as he snipped a small sprig of basil for someone to smell. "It used to be I couldn't do half of this," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Now I can actively garden." The day ended with everyone feeling the garden's renewed spirit, no longer just a patch of vegetables, but a symbol of hope and cooperation. If Karen had intended to kill the project, she'd unwittingly propelled it to new heights, forging even deeper communal bonds. For the volunteers, the harvested tomatoes and peppers tasted doubly sweet, ripened by both sunlight and unwavering solidarity. Despite the garden's resounding success, Karen refused to drop her grievances. She filed a new complaint with the board, claiming the fence's style and color clashed with Brook Hollow Green's uniform guidelines, referencing obscure sections of the bylaw about external structures. She also insisted the ramp's presence was an unnecessary addition that encouraged older folks to linger and draw attention, a line so callous it prompted outcry from the board. Ms. Caldwell nearly dismissed the complaint outright, but decided to address it at the next meeting for formality's sake. In parallel, Karen attempted to gather signatures from neighbors who might be swayed by her argument about property values. She discovered few supporters. Many who once found her strict approach tolerable now viewed her as malicious. The fiasco of stomping the garden had tarnished her credibility. She managed only 2 or 3 half-hearted signatures, none from influential voices. The board meeting arrived, again drawing a decent crowd. Karen's complaint was read aloud. Linda responded by showing color swatches, proving the fence and ramp matched the community's approved palette. She also displayed multiple letters from seniors praising the improved accessibility. Ms. Caldwell then announced a letter from the local fire department stating the fence height was not a hazard, and the ramp adhered to general safety standards. With each piece of evidence, Karen's complaint crumbled. When given time to speak, Karen mumbled about unregulated expansions and eyesores. The board dismissed her remarks, reaffirming their approval of the garden's design. Polite applause followed. Karen glared, then slipped out, defeated once more. Many believe this spelled the end of her crusade. The entire neighborhood recognized that the new garden was there to stay, validated by official channels. And so, Karen's final attempt to undermine the project fizzled, overshadowed by the unstoppable wave of community backing. Encouraged by local chatter, a regional newspaper decided to cover the story of Brook Hollow Green's community garden transformation. A reporter named Amanda Quinn arrived on a crisp morning, camera in tow, to interview Linda, Martin, and a few other volunteers. They walked her along the raised beds, describing the journey from initial sabotage to the newly fortified layout. Amanda took photos of seniors leaning over tall planters, sprinkling water on budding peppers. She snapped shots of the fence with its cheerful sign and the gently sloped ramp that welcomed all visitors, including wheelchair users. Over a cup of lemonade, Linda recounted the harrowing moment Karen stomped the garden. "We were heartbroken," Linda said, "but that heartbreak fueled our determination to rebuild better." Amanda asked about the conflict with Karen. Linda, tactful, avoided naming her or dwelling on negativity, focusing instead on the outpouring of neighborly cooperation. Martin chimed in about how the new design let him garden without pain. "I never expected such an inclusive space here," he said, eyes moist. "Now I can do more than watch. I can participate." The reporter, moved by their stories, promised a positive feature. A week later, the article appeared, "From Ruin to Renewal: How One Suburban Community's Garden Grew Stronger After Vandalism." It showcased photos of Linda, Martin, and gleaming raised beds full of fresh sprouts. The piece praised the resilient spirit of Brook Hollow Greens, hailing the ramp's accessibility as a shining example of thoughtful design. Seeing the published story, neighbors felt a surge of pride. Some posted it on social media, tagging local groups. Even Ms. Caldwell printed a copy to display on the clubhouse bulletin board. Meanwhile, Karen glimpsed the article with a mixture of rage and resignation. Her sabotage had ironically garnered the garden even more acclaim. The community's triumph overshadowed her earlier attempts at undermining it. By late summer, the garden thrived in full bloom. Lush vines spilled over the raised beds, bursting with cucumbers, squash, and plump tomatoes. Bell peppers hung in clusters of green, red, and yellow. Rows of lettuce and spinach flourished under partial shade. Herbs like basil and rosemary scented the air. The fence, adorned with climbing morning glories, lent a gentle charm. In celebration, Linda and the committee planned a harvest festival. They invited all residents of Brook Hollow Greens to sample fresh produce, exchange recipes, and enjoy the outdoors. The event promised free tastings, salsa made from garden tomatoes, cucumber salad, herb bread rolls. Some seniors set up a small stand to teach kids how to pot seedlings in biodegradable cups. On the morning of the festival, volunteers decorated the fence with ribbons and a banner reading, "Harvesting Happiness." They placed chairs near the ramp, ensuring everyone could gather comfortably. Families arrived throughout the day, marveling at how the once-ruined patch had become an abundant oasis. Children popped cherry tomatoes into their mouths, exclaiming at the sweet burst of flavor. Karen hovered at a distance, scanning the lively crowd. She couldn't muster the courage to approach, knowing any attempt to denigrate the garden would be met with scorn. Some onlookers offered her polite nods, but she merely scowled and turned away. The festival continued joyfully without her involvement. At midday, Linda gave a short speech. "This festival is proof that when negativity tries to tear us down, we can band together and grow something wonderful. Each leaf, each fruit, each smile today is a testament to community spirit." Applause erupted, followed by a sampling of homemade foods. Laughter, music, and the aroma of fresh produce filled the air. In that moment, the overshadowing presence of Karen's sabotage felt like a distant memory. The garden, fenced, ramped, and bountiful, emerged as a shining centerpiece of Brook Hollow Greens. Despite the garden's success, tensions with Karen never fully dissipated. Some residents reported seeing her pace around at odd hours, scowling at the fence. She occasionally posted on the community forum, claiming that the garden still looks unkempt in certain corners, or that the fence color might not match exactly under certain lighting. Each time, the board or other neighbors reminded her that the structure was officially sanctioned. The matter was closed. Most quietly pitted her. She had alienated nearly everyone with her destructive actions. freed from her meddling. Neighbors realized how stifling her oversight had been in the past. One resident joked that maybe Karen's meltdown was the best thing that ever happened to the community because it sparked unprecedented unity. But no one wanted to see her humiliated or gone. They only wished she'd let go of her vendetta and find more positive ways to engage. As for Linda, she harbored no hatred. In private conversations, she expressed sorrow that Karen's priorities lay in outward appearances over communal harmony. If she just recognized the beauty of real growth. Yes, it's messy, but that's nature. Maybe she'd find joy in it too, Linda mused. Some wondered if Karen might eventually come around, but she showed no sign of softening. She remained on the sidelines, quietly resentful, offering no apology or admission of wrongdoing. Meanwhile, the garden committee pressed on. They planned a second planting for the fall season: broccoli, kale, some root vegetables. The ramp was well used by seniors, ensuring year-round engagement. Kids from the local elementary school visited on field trips, learning about sustainable gardening. Each day, the once controversial patch bustled with life, a testament to the power of a determined community in the face of one person's hostility. As autumn leaves turned golden, Linda received a surprising email from a local nonprofit that supported senior citizen projects. They had read about the Brook Hollow Greens garden in the regional newspaper. Impressed by the ramp and inclusive design, they offered a small grant to further enhance accessibility, perhaps to add seating areas or a greenhouse corner so seniors could garden even in cooler weather. The nonprofit believed the garden could serve as a model for other neighborhoods. Linda was elated. She brought the news to the garden committee, who brainstormed potential upgrades. Maybe a few shaded benches so seniors could rest while working the beds, or a small table for potting. The prospect of more resources gave them a chance to refine the garden's design further. Once again, they turned to the HOA, which, thrilled at the positive spotlight, readily approved expansions. Karen inevitably found out about the grant. She seethed, calling the nonprofit's interest misguided. But few listened to her complaints. The garden had grown beyond local trivialities, now recognized region-wide as a success story. Even Ms. Caldwell expressed pride, telling neighbors that Brook Hollow Greens was on the map for inclusive community projects. Hammers and saws soon echoed again around the garden as volunteers built sturdy benches with backrests, some sized to let seniors rest a watering can or small tools beside them. They laid a smooth paver surface near the ramp, ensuring wheelchairs had traction even if the soil was damp. Each addition made the space more comfortable and accessible. The final touch might be a small greenhouse in one corner, still in the planning stages. Through it all, Henry, a retiree who'd recently discovered the garden after hearing about Karen's fiasco, grew an array of herbs, praising how easily he could roll up in his scooter. "Never thought I'd see the day our community invests so lovingly in a garden," he said, tears in his eyes. The garden soared to new heights, ironically thanks to the impetus from Karen's sabotage. At last, the crisp autumn air signaled the final yield of summer's produce. The raised beds overflowed with the year's final tomatoes and peppers, while new cooler weather crops, spinach, kale, and radishes, peeked from the soil. The fresh benches and paver walkway beckoned neighbors of all ages to linger, chat, and share harvest tips. The ramp, now a standard fixture, bustled with foot traffic from seniors, parents pushing strollers, or kids on scooters. Every day, laughter and conversation replaced the memory of stomped seedlings. On a bright Saturday morning, the garden committee organized a casual fall closing celebration. They set out cider, donuts, and sample dishes made from the garden's produce, like roasted pepper salsa and zucchini bread. Families mingled, congratulating each other on another successful growing season. The conversation buzzed with plans for next spring. Some suggested a small orchard corner with dwarf fruit trees, or a pollinator beehive, if the HOA allowed. Creativity soared now that the garden had proven unstoppable. Karen was noticeably absent from the festivities, remaining behind drawn curtains in her tidy home. Some might have gloated at her self-inflicted exile, but the mood was more forgiving. People were too engrossed in positivity to dwell on her negativity. They had reclaimed the space she tried to crush, forging something far more robust than the original. By midday, Linda and Martin took a moment to reflect. Standing near the gate, They surveyed the fenced, ramp-equipped wonder they helped build. Martin placed a hand on the fence post. She called them ugly vegetables, but I can't imagine anything more beautiful than this place now. Linda nodded, her heart full. We overcame pettiness with unity. This garden is living proof. Thus ended Brookhollow Green's greatest test of neighborly spirit. From seeds of tension sprouted an unbreakable bond among residents, culminating in a secure, fully accessible community garden. The story of Karen's destructive tantrum faded into a cautionary tale overshadowed by the vibrant harvest. In the end, the garden soared, encircled by a welcoming fence, graced with a sturdy ramp, and forever enriched by the unwavering care of those who refused to let malice triumph over growth and compassion.